Hi everyone, in this video we'll implement logging functionality for our application where the method will accept the user credentials, that is the username and password, and authenticate with our database. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the user controller class where I'll have the logging endpoint. So let's do that. So here I'm going to create a method called logging. I'm going to have this as public and it's going to be, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to return the user DTO as the response, okay, after the successful authentication. So this is going to be logging request body, and I'll also take it, and the request body is going to be again the user DTO, which has the username and password. So that's all I need from the user DTO object. So here I'm going to say user DTO, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to authenticate the user. For that, what I'll do is I'll create a separate private method called authenticate where I'll have the authentication done. Authenticate user DTO.get username, user DTO.get password. So let's create this. And here what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the authentication manager. Now for this, we need to have the authentication manager auto-while here. That is the instance. So authentication manager. And I'll auto-while this. Okay, now I can use this authentication manager dot authenticate, and you can see that it is expecting an authentication object. Okay, so for that we'll be using username password authentication token, where it takes the principal, that is the username, as the argument, and the credential, that is our password. Okay, that's it. So what it's going to do is internally, this authenticate method is going to invoke the load by username method from the user service. So I'll just take you there. This is here. So in our previous sessions what we did is we told the Spring Security to make use of user service because it implements user detail service, okay, which is again from the Spring Security. So internally when you say authentication manager dot authenticate, what it's going to do is it's going to use load user by username. It's going to load this user, okay, and it's going to return the user details. So this is something that is going to come from the database, okay, this user details. And what we have is again here, if you go back here and see that it is going to internally again going to compare the username, password, and do all the authentication for us. Okay, so with that, we also need to make sure one thing is that we have the authentication manager being exposed. What that means is in our config file we need to have a method, we need to override a method that exposes this authentication manager bean. So to do that, we'll go to our configuration file, and what we're going to do is here we're going to override one method called authentication manager bean. Okay, and this here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say this as bean. That's it. Now it should be good that we should now we should get the bean here, that is the authentication manager, and we should be able to authenticate. So if there is any exception, okay, if there is any issue with the credentials, then there's going to be an exception thrown. Okay, that is going to happen all internally from the Spring Security APIs. So here, if it is successful, then we are going to get the next line, that is the next line in this method. So here what we're going to do is we're going to build the user and also generate the token, because in our previous session we told that we discussed that the token is going to be generated only on successful authentication of the user, right? So here is where we are going to do that. So for that, let's go back here and do that. User DTO, and I would say user is equal to this dot user service dot find. What happened? It's going to say, let's see, it's going to say load. Do I have find by user? Okay, it looks like I don't have the find user. Let's see. Okay, I don't have the method that says find user by username. So let's do that. Let's create a method that says public user DTO find user by username, and I'm going to pass here the username. And with this, it's going to give me an error here in the service. Let's see, do I have that? Yes, I don't have it. So let's save all the file first. And here I have to implement it. And this is going to return me the method. So with that, let's implement find user method. And it's going to be here. It says this return this dot get user DTO. Okay, and I'll say this dot user repo dot find. Okay, do I have the find? Yes, I do have the find user by username. So I hope you're getting what I'm doing. I'm using the this dot get user DTO. I'm converting the entity object to the user DTO, and this is what I'm going to return, and this is what I'll be using in my user controller class here. Okay, and I'll say this as user DTO dot get username. Perfect. So I got my user DTO object, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the password here. User dot password. I don't want to send the password back to the client, so I'll just nullify here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate the JWT token, and I would say JWT token is equal to this dot JWT. Okay, I don't have that as an instance variable. Let me do that. I'd say JWT token util, and I'll auto add this. Here is where I'm going to use this, and I would say generate token, and here it's asking for the principal. So if you look at here, what do we have? Okay, it takes user principal. So how do we create a user principal? It is by using the user DTO. So I'll show this user principal, and I'm using the user. Okay, so this is what I'm going to use here. Finally, we got the token, and now the token needs to be set in the header. So what I'll do is I'll say http headers, okay, from the Spring framework, and I would say headers is equal to new http headers add, and the header name is going to be authorization, and here I'm going to add the bearer space and the token. Okay, and then finally what I'm going to do is I'm going to return the user DTO. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same thing. Instead of entity model, what I'll do is I'll use a response entity. Okay, that is also fine. Response entity. Okay, and here what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a response entity dot okay dot body is going to be the user DTO. It's going to be just the user. This we're going to pass this object, and then here I'm going to add the headers. Let's add the headers, and the headers is going to be the headers dot body. Perfect. So what we did, we authenticated the user. Okay, if it is successful, then this thing is going to get executed, all this logic, or else it's going to throw an exception here itself. So on the successful authentication, I'm just fetching the user from the database, then I'm nullifying the user password, and then creating a token and setting it in the header with the name authorization. So remember, in our filter we used authorization. If you look at the authorization in our filter here, so you remember we have the request.get header. For any request that's coming in, it is going to check the authorization header and then validate the token. So for that, what we're doing is here we are just creating it here. Okay, we are creating the token and setting it to the authorization, and finally we return back the header as well as the body. So with this, let's do the mapping. The mapping is going to be, I'm going to make this as post mapping, and the path is going to be logging, and I'm going to have the consume and produces JSON. Okay, so with this, everything looks good in the user controller. There are some compiled errors in user. Let's see, I don't see any, but let's save this file. It's gone. Fine, so everything looks good. So one thing that we also need to do is we need to make sure that this path is open, right? It does not go through the security. We don't want this path to go through the security. So for that, we have to go back again to our app security, and what we're going to do is we're going to update the configure method here. So for that, what we'll do is we'll create a static variable here and make this as, instead of public, I'll make it as private static final. I'm going to make this a string array because I can have multiple paths that can be, that needs to be bypassed by the, that needs to bypass the security. So here I'm going to use public URLs, and then I'm going to make this as login. Okay, for now I just have login, so I'm just going to give this here, and this is what I'm going to use here. Okay, so before that, let's also update few things here. Okay, one thing is we definitely don't need the CSRF here in our example. Authorize, we are going to add few more things. I'll tell what exactly we are adding here. We are going to add session management. Okay, and we're telling that the session management is stateless. Okay, session creation policy, and I would say dot stateless. So I'm making this application that there should not be any session management. Okay, so it's a stateless, the whole application being a REST is stateless. That's what I'm specifying here. So next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add and, okay, and then I'm saying the and matcher public URLs should permit all. So this is login, it should permit this. Okay, so I'm bypassing the security for all my public URLs. And for rest, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that for any other request, okay, for any other request, authenticate. Okay, all other request needs to be authenticated. Okay, and then I guess that's all we have. Okay, for now everything looks good. And one more thing, we can also add course. Okay, course is cross site origin resource. That is something that we can also have. Okay, so with this, I guess we are all good with the configuration of our logging URL. So I hope you're getting what we added. We added just the session management, saying that it is a stateless, means all the request or the application is stateless. That's the policy we applied. Next thing is we told that, okay, there should be public URLs and needs to be permit all. And then all the requests, that any request that's coming in should be authenticated. Okay, and rest everything is the same what we have. Fine. So with this, I guess we are all set with our logging method. Let's take a quick look at if we are missing anything. Okay, we have the logging and the response and headers, authorization bearer, and authentication. Right. Okay, perfect. So everything looks good. So what we're going to do in our next session is we are going to test all the logic that we added, that is with JWT and logging, and this we'll do in our next session. That's all for this video. Till then, take care. Thank you.